Watch this security camera in Kidbrooke, southeast London. A man in dark clothing walks down a quiet street near Pegler Square, something long and angular in his hand. His head snaps left, right, over his shoulder, 3 times in 30 seconds. He reaches Cator Park, stops at the entrance, looks around one more time, pulls his hood up, disappears into the darkness. Different camera, different entrance, same park. A young woman in a dress walks quickly, purposefully, like she's running late, but not worried. She enters Cator Park alone, 8:40 p.m. The hooded man reappears, same camera, different behavior. He walks to a bench, bends down, picks things up from the ground, searching, methodical. He pulls tissues from his pocket, wipes down the bench surface, slowly, thoroughly, stands, walks to a silver car parked on the street, gets in. The car pulls away. The timestamp keeps rolling. 8:45, 9 o'clock, 9:30. She walked into Cator Park at 8:30 on a Friday night in September. She never walked out. Her name was Sabina Nessa. She was 28 years old. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any coverage in this channel.
Teacher Sabina Nessa was murdered by a stranger as she walked through a park in Kidbrooke.
Sabina Nessa was a primary school teacher at Rushy Green Primary School in Catford, southeast London. Every weekday, she stood in front of a classroom of 30 children aged 5 and 6, Year 1 students who were just beginning to learn how to read and write. Her head teacher, Lisa Williams, later described Sabina as brilliant, kind, caring, and absolutely dedicated to her pupils. Parents praised her patience. Her students adored her. She had that rare quality that makes a great teacher, the ability to make every child feel seen and valued. Sabina hadn't stumbled into teaching by accident. She had worked hard to get there. In 2014, she graduated from the University of Greenwich with a degree in sociology. 6 years later, in 2020, she returned to school to earn her teaching certification from the University of Bedfordshire. Everything she did was purposeful, each step carefully planned to bring her closer to her goals. Sabina lived on Astell Road in Kidbrooke, not far from the park where she would take that final walk. She came from a close, loving family. Her parents, Azra and Abdur Rauf Nessa, had raised her alongside her sisters. One of them, Jabina Yasmin Islam, would later speak publicly about the loss. Her cousin Zubal Ahmed, or I described the family as devastated and inconsolable. To her sisters, Sabina was more than just family. She was a role model, someone who taught them to put themselves first, to never let anyone put them down, to chase their dreams without apology. And Sabina had dreams. Teaching in London was just the beginning. She wanted to take her skills abroad. Specifically, she had her sights set on the Middle East. She wanted to combine her passion for education with her desire to experience different cultures, to see the world, to challenge herself in new environments. At 28, she was building toward that future, gaining experience, saving money, making plans. She was exactly where she wanted to be in life. On the evening of September 17, 2021, Sabina had finished another week of teaching. It was Friday. The weekend stretched ahead. She had plans to meet a friend at a local pub called The Depot in Kidbrooke Village. It was supposed to be a simple, relaxing evening, a chance to unwind after a long week with her students. She got ready at home, put on makeup, chose one of her favorite dresses. She left her flat on Astell Road around 8:30 in the evening. The pub was close, just a 5 to 8 minute walk depending on the route. Sabina had 2 options. She could take the longer route through residential streets, well lit and populated, or she could cut through Cator Park, shaving a few minutes off her journey. She chose the park. It was a decision that would cost her everything. Friday evening, September 17th, 2021. For most people in Kidbrooke, it was an ordinary end to an ordinary week. The sun was setting later now that autumn was approaching. The air was warm. The streets were busy with people heading out for the evening. Sabina had plans to meet a friend at the Depot, a pub in Kidbrooke Village. It was a casual spot, popular with locals, the kind of place you go to relax after a long week. According to reports, Sabina typically avoided walking through the park at night. She felt uneasy about it. Like many women, she had learned to calculate risk every time she stepped outside after dark. But that evening, she was running late, and the sun hadn't fully set yet. There was still light in the sky. The park was small, just a few minutes to walk through, then she'd be back on a main road. She made the decision that thousands of people make every day. She chose the faster route. She entered Cator Park alone. At the Depot, her friend checked the time. 8:40, 8:45, 9 o'clock. Sabina should have arrived by now. The walk was only 5 to 8 minutes. Even if she'd left late, she should be here. Her friend sent a text, no response. She tried calling. The phone rang, but no one picked up. After 30 minutes, concern started to build, but not alarm. Not yet. Maybe something had come up. Maybe Sabina couldn't make it and forgot to send a message. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she got caught up with something at home. People make excuses when someone doesn't show up. It's easier than imagining the worst. But those who knew Sabina knew something was wrong. She never ignored calls from friends. She never forgot to communicate. If her plans changed, she always let people know. Sabina was reliable, thoughtful, the kind of person who always showed up. But that night, she didn't. Because by the time her friend sent that first text message, Sabina was already gone. The hooded man captured on those security cameras was 36-year-old Kosi Selimaj. He worked at an Esso gas station in Eastbourne, a quiet coastal town approximately 65 miles south of London. To anyone who saw him at work, he seemed ordinary, just another working-class man trying to make a living. Selimaj was an Albanian immigrant. He had been married to a woman named Ionela, who worked at the Grand Hotel in Eastbourne. It was a 5-star property, the kind of place where wealthy tourists stayed when visiting the seaside. On paper, Selimaj's life looked normal, unremarkable. He had a job, a wife, a place to live. But beneath that surface, something dark was growing. In the weeks leading up to September 17th, Ionela had made a difficult decision. She left her husband. The reason was simple and terrifying. Selimaj had become physically aggressive toward her. Multiple times, the violence was escalating. She feared for her safety. The separation should have been the end of their story. Ionela moved on. She tried to rebuild her life. But Selimaj couldn't accept that his marriage was over. He began stalking her, showing up at the Grand Hotel where she worked, watching her, waiting for glimpses of her in the lobby or hallways. Hotel staff grew uncomfortable with his presence. He would sit in the lobby for hours, staring, not just at Ionela, but at other women who passed by. His behavior was predatory, unsettling, wrong. Then came September 17th, 2021. That morning, Selimaj checked into the Grand Hotel as a guest. He booked a room for one night. This was strange for one simple reason. He lived just 5 minutes away from the hotel. There was no logical reason for him to stay there. But he wasn't there for a room. He was there for Ionela. According to reports, Ionela agreed to speak with him that afternoon. Perhaps she hoped to reason with him one final time, to make him understand that their relationship was over. They met in his car in the hotel parking lot. The conversation did not go well. Sitting in the back seat, Selimaj made an inappropriate advance toward his estranged wife. Ionela was stunned. She refused immediately. She got out of the car and walked away, leaving him alone in that parking lot. Selimaj sat there, angry, humiliated, rejected. What happened next would destroy multiple lives and shake an entire community. Instead of calming down, instead of going home, Selimaj made a decision. He got behind the wheel of his silver Nissan Micra and started driving. Not back to his flat 5 minutes away. Not to clear his head with a short drive along the coast. He drove north, toward London, 65 miles away. It would take him over an hour to get there. And what happened during that drive, what was going through his mind as he covered those 65 miles, would be captured on multiple cameras across 2 cities. Cameras that would eventually lead police straight to his door. According to prosecutors who would later present evidence in court, he had made a decision during that drive. He intended to attack a stranger, a woman, any woman. His anger at being rejected by Ionela had transformed into something far more dangerous. Security cameras tracked his arrival in Kidbrooke, southeast London, sometime in the early evening. He parked his silver car near Cator Park. He got out and walked to a local supermarket. Cameras captured him entering the store, moving through the aisles. Then he returned to his vehicle. Court records later confirmed what happened next. Selimaj selected a metal emergency warning triangle from his car. The kind of reflective triangle that drivers are supposed to keep in their vehicles for roadside breakdowns. It was approximately 2 feet long. When folded, it became compact, solid, heavy. It would serve as a weapon. Selimaj walked toward Pegler Square, a road that runs alongside Cator Park. He was carrying the triangle in his hand. And this is where the security footage from the beginning of this video begins. The timestamp reads approximately 8 o'clock in the evening, September 17th, 2021. The camera captures Selimaj walking alone, looking around nervously, checking behind him, his head turning left and right. He's scanning the area, watching for people, for witnesses, for cameras he might have missed. He reaches the edge of Cator Park and stops. He wasn't there to enjoy the evening air. He wasn't there to take a walk or clear his head. He was waiting, watching, looking for an opportunity, for a victim. Selimaj had driven 65 miles with a weapon in his hand and violence in his mind. He had chosen this park, this neighborhood, this moment. And now he was standing at the entrance, hidden in the growing darkness, waiting for someone to walk by. Someone alone, someone vulnerable, someone like Sabina Nessa. This case highlights the importance of community awareness and the role of surveillance in solving crimes. If you're finding this coverage valuable, please like this video. It helps more people learn about cases like Sabina's. Sabina entered the park alone around 8:30 in the evening. Selimaj saw her. He raised his hood, and he followed. There are no cameras inside Cator Park. What happened next was reconstructed from physical evidence, forensic analysis, and Selimaj's own confession. According to court testimony, he sprinted toward her. Before Sabina could react, before she could turn around or call for help, he struck her over the head with the folded metal triangle. Prosecutors said he hit her 34 times, 34 blows to her head and body. The force was so brutal that parts of the weapon shattered. Pieces of metal broke off and fell to the ground. Sabina collapsed onto a park bench, unconscious. Selimaj dragged her body into nearby bushes, away from the path. Court records state that he strangled her and disturbed her clothing. The judge who later sentenced him described the attack as sexually motivated. However, there was no evidence of further violation. Prosecutors argued that Selimaj's gratification came from violence and power, not intimacy, not connection, just the act of dominating and destroying another human being. When it was over, he covered her body with branches, hiding her in the undergrowth. Then, as security cameras show, he returned to the bench. He bent down and began picking up fragments of the broken triangle, searching the ground carefully, making sure he didn't leave anything behind. He pulled tissues from his pocket and wiped down the surface of the bench, slowly, methodically, erasing any trace of what had just happened. When he was satisfied, he stood up and walked calmly back toward his silver car. He got in, started the engine, and drove away. The entire attack, from the moment he followed Sabina into the park to the moment he left, took less than 20 minutes. 20 minutes to destroy a life, to shatter a family, to leave a community in shock and grief. Sabina Nessa, a 28-year-old teacher who had spent her week caring for children, who had dreams of teaching abroad, who had gotten dressed up for a simple Friday night out with a friend, was gone, and Kochi Selimaj was already on his way back to Eastbourne. Security cameras tracked Selimaj's silver Nissan Micra, leaving Kidbrooke around 9 o'clock in the evening. He drove south, back toward Eastbourne, back toward the life he had left just hours earlier. But he wasn't finished yet. Halfway back near Tunbridge Wells in Kent, he stopped the car. According to his later confession to police, he got out and walked to the River Tees. He threw the shattered metal triangle into the water. The weapon that had ended Sabina's life disappeared beneath the surface. Gone. Or so he thought. Then he got back in his car and continued driving. He arrived at the Grand Hotel just after midnight. Lobby cameras captured him walking through the entrance, heading to his room. His movements were calm, collected, like someone returning from an ordinary evening out. There was no panic, no visible guilt, no sign that he had just committed murder less than 4 hours earlier. He went to his room. He slept. The next morning, Saturday, September 18th, Selimaj woke up and went to work at the Esso garage. He served customers. He handled transactions. He went through the motions of a normal day. For Kochi Selimaj, life continued as if nothing had happened. But 65 miles north, in Kidbrooke, the nightmare was just beginning. Sabina's family had spent Friday night wondering where she was, calling her phone, sending messages, getting no response. By Saturday morning, they knew something was terribly wrong. Sabina would never ignore her family. She would never disappear without explanation. They contacted the police. They reached out to friends. They searched for answers. And in Cator Park, hidden beneath branches in the tall grass near a community center, Sabina's body lay undiscovered. She had been there all night, all morning, just meters away from a path that hundreds of people used every day. It would take nearly 24 hours from the time of the attack before someone finally found her. 24 hours while Selimaj slept peacefully in his hotel room and went to work as if nothing had changed. 24 hours, while Sabina's family grew more desperate for answers. 24 hours that felt like a lifetime. Saturday, September 18th, 2021. The weather was mild, comfortable, the kind of day that brings people outside. Kidbrooke was busy with weekend activity. Joggers ran their usual routes. Families walked through the neighborhood. Dog walkers explored the local green spaces. Cator Park saw its normal flow of visitors. People passed through on their way to shops or cafes. Children played near the edges. No one suspected that anything was wrong. Around 5:28 in the evening, a man was walking his dog through the park. His dog began acting strangely near an area of tall grass, pulling towards something, sniffing the air, refusing to move on. The man walked closer to investigate. He saw someone lying in the grass, or covered with branches. He called out. Police arrived within minutes. They cordoned off the area with tape. Officers moved quickly to secure the scene. Sabina Nessa had been lying there for nearly 24 hours, hidden just meters from a path that hundreds of people used every single day. Investigators identified her quickly. They contacted her family that same evening. According to her cousin, Zubal Ahmed, who later spoke publicly, Sabina's parents were absolutely shocked, inconsolable, the moment the police officer came to their house and told them their daughter was found dead. Their world shattered into pieces. News spread quickly through Kidbrooke. By Sunday morning, as the entire community knew what had happened, people were shaken, frightened, confused. How could this happen in a small residential park? How could a young woman be attacked during the early evening when the sun hadn't even fully set? Cator Park wasn't some isolated, dangerous area. It was a neighborhood green space. Families used it. Children played there. People walked through it every day without a second thought. And yet Sabina had been murdered there, violently, brutally. Her body had lain hidden for nearly a full day while joggers ran past, while dog walkers strolled by, while life continued as normal just meters away. The realization was devastating. If it could happen to Sabina, a responsible, careful young woman walking through a familiar park in the early evening, it could happen to anyone. The sense of safety that people had taken for granted was gone, and the questions were just beginning. On Monday, September 20th, a post-mortem examination was conducted at Greenwich Mortuary. The results were inconclusive. Medical examiners could not definitively determine whether Sabina died from blunt force trauma to the head or from strangulation. The reality was that both had been inflicted. Both were fatal. Police launched a full investigation. They appealed to the public for help. They asked for CCTV footage, dash cam recordings, witness statements, anything that might have captured activity near Cator Park on Friday evening. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people submitted information. Residents checked their home security systems. Drivers reviewed their dash cam footage. As the community rallied to help find whoever was responsible. On Thursday, September 23rd, police arrested a 38-year-old man in Lewisham on suspicion of murder. But after questioning, they released him. There was no evidence connecting him to the crime. The investigation seemed to be stalling. Days were passing. The killer was still out there. Then, on Friday, September 24th, exactly 1 week after Sabina's murder, police made a critical decision. They released the CCTV footage publicly, the video showing the hooded man on Pegler Square, carrying an object, looking around nervously, pulling his hood up before entering the park. The footage was broadcast on news channels, shared on social media, seen by thousands of people across London and beyond. The response was immediate. Multiple anonymous tips came in. People who recognized the man, his walk, his build, his clothing, they all identified the same person, Kochi Selimaj, a garage worker from Eastbourne. In the early hours of Sunday, September 26th, at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, police arrived at Selimaj's flat in Eastbourne. They arrested him on suspicion of murder. Detective Chief Inspector Neil John, who led the investigation, later described Selimaj's demeanor during the arrest. He appeared calm and collected. There was no panic, no resistance. He was taken into custody and brought to a police station for questioning. In the interrogation room, Selimaj initially refused to speak. He sat in silence, stone-faced, offering nothing to investigators. But after being formally charged with Sabina's murder, something changed. Through an interpreter, and Selimaj asked a single question. What will happen if I open up now and say everything? Whatever arrangement was made, Selimaj began talking. He confessed to the entire sequence of events. The argument with his estranged wife, Ionella, earlier that day. The inappropriate advance she rejected. His decision to drive 65 miles to London, selecting the metal triangle as a weapon, walking through Kidbrooke, looking for a victim, seeing Sabina enter the park alone, following her, the attack, covering her body, disposing of the weapon in the River Tace, returning to the Grand Hotel as if nothing had happened. He admitted everything. On Monday, September 27th, Koti Selimaj was formally charged with the murder of Sabina Nessa. 9 days after he had taken her life, he was finally in custody. But for Sabina's family, the nightmare was far from over. On Thursday, September 30th, 2021, Selimaj made his first court appearance at the Old Bailey via video link from prison. On December 16th, he pleaded not guilty to murder, but his lawyer made a strange statement. Selimaj, he said, accepts responsibility for the killing. The contradiction made no sense. He admitted killing Sabina, but claimed he wasn't guilty of murder. Then, on February 25th, 2022, at the start of his trial, Selimaj changed his plea to guilty. Sentencing was scheduled for April. Sabina's family prepared impact statements. They wanted to confront him, to look him in the eye, to make him understand what he had taken from them. Her parents, Azra and Abdurrauf Nessa, wrote, "You had no right to take her away from us in such a cruel way. The moment the police officer came to our house and told us she was found dead, our world shattered into pieces. How could you do such a thing to an innocent girl walking by, minding her own business? You are not a human being. You are an animal." April 7th, 2022. Sentencing day. Sabina's family arrived at the Old Bailey. They were ready to face the man who had destroyed their lives. But Selimaj refused to appear in court. He stayed in his cell while the family read their statements to an empty chair. The judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, called this cowardly, but he said he had no power to force Selimaj to attend. He sentenced him in his absence. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 36 years. Selimaj will not be eligible for parole until 2057. He will be 72 years old. The judge described the attack as savage and sexually motivated. He said Sabina was the wholly blameless victim of an absolutely appalling murder, which was entirely the fault of the defendant. He added that her death contributed to the sense of insecurity felt particularly by women walking through cities at night. She had every right, as her family said, to be walking through the park, all glammed up and out to enjoy herself after a long week at work. The defendant robbed her and them of her life. But Selimaj never heard those words. He hid in his cell like the coward he was. He took everything from Sabina and her family. And then he refused to face the consequences. Sabina's murder came just 6 months after another tragedy that had shocked the nation. In March 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was kidnapped and killed by a Metropolitan Police officer as she walked home in South London. Both cases sparked national conversations about women's safety, about the calculations women make every time they step outside, about the fear that has become so normalized it's almost invisible. Campaigners pointed to what they called an epidemic of violence against women. According to Counting Dead Women, a group that tracks these cases, at least 108 women in the United Kingdom were killed by men in 2021 alone. 108 lives, 108 families destroyed. London Mayor Sadiq Khan called for misogyny to be classified as a hate crime under UK law. Member of Parliament Janet Davey, who represented the constituency where Sabina was killed, asked a simple question in Parliament. How many women's lives must be stolen before this government takes serious action? Vigils were held across London. Thousands of people gathered to light candles, lay flowers, and demand change. But many felt the response was too slow, too reactive. As one campaigner put it, every solution we offer is reactive. We never want to talk about masculinity and the way our society develops it. The pattern was clear. A woman is killed. There's public outrage. Vigils are held. Politicians make statements. Promises are made. And then, weeks later, another woman is killed. Sabina's case became part of a larger conversation, not just about individual safety measures, but about the root causes of male violence against women. About why men like Kochi Selimaj feel entitled to take their anger out on innocent strangers. About why women are expected to constantly assess risk, change routes, share locations, and live in fear, while the focus remains on what women should do differently instead of why men commit violence in the first place. Despite Selimaj's confession and conviction, several questions remain unanswered. The post-mortem examination was inconclusive. Did Sabina die from blunt force trauma, strangulation, or both? The truth is, it doesn't matter which specific act ended her life. Selimaj was responsible for both. What exactly motivated him to drive 65 miles to attack a stranger? Prosecutors said the attack was sexually motivated, but Selimaj provided no real explanation beyond accepting responsibility. Oh, why was Sabina not reported missing that night? Her friend waited at the pub, sent messages, tried calling, but no alarm was raised until the next day. Would an earlier report have made a difference? We'll never know. What forensic evidence was recovered from Selimaj's car, his hotel room, his clothing? Investigators have not publicly confirmed those details. And then there's the question that sparked national debate after Selimaj refused to attend his sentencing. Should courts have the power to force defendants to appear? Should victims' families have the right to confront the person who destroyed their lives, regardless of whether that person wants to be there? In the UK, judges currently have no authority to compel attendance. Defendants can simply refuse. Many argue this adds insult to injury, and that it grants perpetrators one final act of control. The debate continues. Sabina Nessa should be 31 years old now. She should be teaching abroad, living the life she planned, experiencing the cultures she dreamed about. Instead, her life ended in a 3-minute walk through a park. Her family continues to honor her memory. Her sisters advocate for women's safety, refusing to let Sabina become just another statistic. They want the world to remember. Sabina was talented, caring, full of potential. She didn't die because she made bad choices or took unnecessary risks. She died because a violent man decided his anger mattered more than her life. Detective Chief Inspector Neil John called Selimaj an evil coward. He said, "It is highly unusual for someone to go from zero to a crime of this magnitude. We are pleased Selimaj will spend the majority of his life in prison, but even 36 years feels inadequate when you consider what was taken." Sabina's case reminds us that danger can be random, unpredictable, but it also reminds us of the importance of community, the CCTV footage, the public tips, the vigils. We can't eliminate all risk, but we can look out for each other. If this case moved you, please share this video to raise awareness. Leave your thoughts in the comments, especially on the question of mandatory court attendance for sentencing. Should defendants be forced to face the families they've destroyed? And please check on your friends. Walk each other home when you can.